Hi, my name is Slavko Bekovic, and this is my legacy. I was born August 27, 1989, Trinity Hospital, now Trinity Hospital. At the time, it was South Chicago Hospital. I was the heaviest baby ever born at South Chicago Hospital at the time. 11 pounds on the dot. They gave her a little bottle of champagne saying, "Congratulations for having the heaviest baby ever at our hospital." I guess my head just kind of stayed the same size and my body grew the rest of the time. First generation American citizen. Both my parents, actually my entire family, are from Serbia. My parents both immigrated over late 70s, early 80s. So obviously that was a big part of my childhood. I didn't really have exposure to the American culture outside of television until I was 5 years old and went to kindergarten. The Serbian culture and background was just always a huge part of my childhood. It was part of my upbringing. My grandparents spoke Serbian. My parents only spoke Serbian to me. I listened to Serbian music. I was just ingrained in the culture despite being born in the United States. I'm so happy that I had that as my background because I feel like I was able to experience cultures that a normal American kid wouldn't really experience. And even now, friends that I work with or people that I might meet, when you tell them they're Serbian, they may not even know anything about it. They don't know where it is or what it's about. Some people immediately just assume Siberia and you're Russian. So I was bilingual naturally as a kid. I learned English very smoothly once I went into school, and I still speak Serbian fluently to this day at 28 years old. I was born in 1989, and basically from 89 on, that whole region of former Yugoslavia was just war-torn. Bosnia, Croatia, Kosovo, it was just literally a decade in the 90s of war, and then it spilled over into the early 2000s as well. At my age, I didn't really know what was going on. I knew kind of to an extent that things weren't great, but I'll never forget that when the war was going on and they bombed Serbia, I believe it was 74 straight days, starting in March of 2000. You're coming home from school, my mom is sitting watching CNN, and my aunts and uncles and cousins all live in Serbia. I have very limited family here in the United States, so coming home and watching CNN, my mom's sitting on the couch and she can't get a hold of her sister, she can't get a hold of anybody in her family. She doesn't know if they're alive or dead, and she's just watching bombs fly on her hometown. The bonds with my family were definitely tighter because of some of the things that we went through together. Like I said, especially at the time of war when you're all that you have here in the United States. For me, it's my mom, my dad, my grandparents on my mom's side, and my two sisters. That's 7 people entirely. We have no other family, extended family or immediate family in the United States. So it comes to a point where you feel like everybody is against you, and that's all you've got is your family. And Serbians in general are very, very family-oriented, extremely family-first culture, to the point where, when I'm 70 years old, if my mom is still alive, she's still going to treat me like I'm a 9-year-old baby. I'm going to go over to her house. She's going to try to offer me food. She's going to make sure I've got everything I need. She'll probably offer to do my laundry. That's just the way that Serbian culture is. My older half-sister's name is Mirjana. Mariana for people that, she's always told in English. She is, next to my mom, the next most amazing person I've ever met. She is the rock of our family, no doubt. There's a 10-year difference in age between her and I, so we grew up. She was more like a babysitter and almost a parental figure, because she was essentially there taking care of me every day after school before my parents got home. So her and I spent a lot of time together, and it was very bumpy when I was a teenager, or when she was a teenager especially. She would pick on me, but there's nothing outside of a normal sibling relationship. But as I got older, high school, definitely in college, and then since then, her and I have gotten very, very close. I rely on her for a lot of advice. She is by far the strongest and most selfless person I've ever met. She puts herself last all the time, which is a shame because she deserves better than that. But she's almost just kind of made it her life goal to be there for everybody else. She is just such a great person. And I don't know where I would be if it wasn't for her. because she's talked me out of a lot of sticky situations, a lot of times where I wasn't, at the top of my game, so to speak. I always go to her when I'm having a tough time, and I always feel bad because I just feel like, who does she go to? She's really just that strong. And I'm sure there are times where she wishes that she could just vent to somebody sometimes, or she had some agenda where she could just kind of take care of herself and not have to worry about everybody else's problems, but she's never run away from that responsibility, and she kind of owns it in our family. So she's definitely, she's the rock. My younger sister is now 24. Her and I don't have the greatest relationship because we are very, very different personalities, very different people. I still love her to death. I still care for her. And that's something that she's always kind of struggled with. And it might just be something because she's the youngest of three. But ever since I can remember, I've always had her best intentions in mind, and sometimes it's tough for her to see that. She's still young, so maybe down the road, maybe we do become closer. I love both of my sisters to death. My mom's name is Gordana, and my father's name is Žarko. I had a very unique relationship with my parents, or watching their relationship, I guess, as a kid. My dad wasn't a bad father, but he really wasn't around. He was not the type of hands-on father that you would expect. He basically was kind of a learn by example type of father, where he did, manly stuff, and you were just supposed to learn because you were supposed to watch him do it. So he was extremely hands off, but he had his, issues outside of the house as well. He was an alcoholic for the most part through most of my childhood. Had a gambling issue as well, and it was kind of one of those things where he became a father at a pretty young age, and I don't think he was ready at all. And that really hurt his relationship with me and my sister, as well as my mom. So my father, so to speak, or at least my father figure as a kid, was always my grandpa. But I never expected anything to happen like what happened with my parents. We found out that my dad was cheating on my mom for like 8 or 9 months. That was a really tough pill to swallow for me. Despite not being super close, he is still my father. So I always respected him. I always held him in such high regard. So to hear that he did something so shameful really, really hurt. They were married 17 years before that happened. So that's really tough. I couldn't believe that he would do that to my mom, who is honestly a living saint. She's the nicest woman on this planet, the most caring person I've ever met. So that was just, it was just devastating for everybody in the family. But it also kind of taught me what not to be in a relationship, told me what kind of man I don't want to become. So in a way, despite him being hands off, I did learn through his mistakes, and I learned by examples of what not to do, mainly with him. To this day, we are almost 13 years past that, and you still deal with it on a day-to-day basis. And I'm thankful for my grandfather for being there for me as more of a father figure. He was more of a father figure to me because he was more hands-on. Every Friday growing up, I'd go spend the night at my grandparents' house. We'd wake up early Saturday morning. My grandma would cook breakfast, and then we'd go fishing in a nearby lake. He taught me how to catch fish. He taught me how to clean fish, how to cook fish. And I always loved being in the outdoors as a kid. So he really kind of just took me by the hand and really led me towards those things where my dad really never did that. When you look back at a father figure, he was the one that kind of taught me so much about being a man and about some of the things that I still hold dear to me today. I was sitting at my grandparents' house in the kitchen, all by myself, watching Scooby-Doo. And I feel like this just happened hours ago. My grandpa comes into the kitchen, and he's like, all right, we're done. It's time for you to become a man. You gotta come over here and watch some sports with me. And he was in the living room watching the White Sox and Oakland Athletics. And I'm like, all right, what is this baseball crap? What do we need to do here? I was kind of bummed at the time. I just want to go watch Scooby-Doo, solve some mysteries. But I sat down and I watched this game, and It might have just been pure luck that it was an exciting baseball game, because out of the 162 that they play in a season, there's probably 10 that are really exciting. Um, but I caught one of the exciting ones. The White Sox won on a walk-off home run in the 9th inning, and I just remember being so excited and so totally engulfed in what was going on in the game. And I remember in that moment, any kid who's watching that would probably go, man, I want to be that player that just hit the walk-off home run and is getting mobbed at home plate. But I instead was the guy who was listening to the play-by-play guy, Ken the Hawk Harrelson, freaking out. And I'm like, I want to be the guy who was screaming on TV. So from that day, I knew I wanted to do something in sports, radio, baseball, whatever. I knew that that was my path, something along those lines. High school was, I don't want to say a culture shock for me, but Serbian family. I grew up in a Mexican neighborhood, and I went to school on the south side on 111th and King Drive. And it was a predominantly African-American, school population. I'd say probably 85, 90% African-American kids. So I was definitely one of the few white kids. In fact, of my grade, I think it was 256. There was only 2 white guys. I never took it as a challenge, or I was never intimidated by that at all. It didn't bother me one bit, because I've always just been able to get along with pretty much anybody that I meet. I don't want to say I was popular, but I was different, so there was always kind of a tension on me, and I guess I kind of liked it, but I was easily able to make friends. It's where I kind of grew into my personality of just being really silly and funny and outgoing, and I think high school was where I started to blossom, I guess, as far as my personality, and that really helped become kind of the first stepping stone to where I am today. Grand Valley State, which is in West Michigan, just outside of Grand Rapids, was essentially the flip-flop of my high school. It was all white kids at Grand Valley. I went and visited the campus, and I just fell in love with it. And it had that vibe of a smaller city when you go to downtown, but 5 minutes outside of the city, you've got the Grand River, you've got Lake Michigan 20 minutes away, you've got beaches, and I love the outdoors. So I can go fish, I can go hunt in Michigan if I wanted to. So the campus was just perfect for me, and they had a really solid broadcasting program that I enrolled in and ultimately got my degree in. If you ask me who my best friends are today, or who would be a groomsman in my wedding, they would actually all be people from college. A lot of that just has to do with me personally feeling like that's when I learned a lot about myself. I'll never forget my best friend Chris. I met him the first day we moved into the dorm room freshman year. And I remember when I first glanced at him, I hated him. I hated his guts. I thought he was just the worst kid in the world. He had like shaggy blonde hair, and he had this cut off shirt. And we had like a meeting in the common area our freshman year in the dorm room. And I remember him, across this common area, and he's laying on his side and his nipples hanging out. And I was like, what a D-bag. I can't stand this kid. And then we played this name game, blah, blah, blah. And here we are. This is now 11 years later. He's my best friend on this planet. He's a basketball coach in Denmark, and I still talk to him frequently. If I get married, he'll be the best man at my wedding. I already know I'll be the best man at his wedding. He'll be the godfather to my kid, etc. So Chris is my best friend. Brian is probably, not that I want to rank my friends, but he's right there with him. Brian was my roommate all 4 years of college. So Chris lived across from us in the dorm rooms freshman year. Brian was actually my roommate. Randomly was paired with this kid. He's from Hoffman Estates. I'm from Chicago. So I remember the summer before moving in freshman year, you get this letter in the mail from the school, and they say, congratulations, you're going to be living with, and I looked at Brian Miara of Hoffman Estates, Illinois. I was like, oh God, let me get some white kid who wears cargo shorts and flip-flops, and he's just going to be the most frat boy ever. And it turns out I wasn't too far off, except he's not the little white kid, he's a little Filipino kid, and his name's Myra, not Miara, but fell in love with him right off the bat. Just a really down-to-earth guy, super funny kid. And we definitely got into our fair share of trouble, but him and I really kind of grew into adults and grew into the men that we are now together. So he's definitely another close friend. I'll never forget my freshman year. This was probably 2 months into moving into the dorms. My parents divorced in high school, and the paperwork never became official until a couple years later. So this was after I'd moved into college, and I remember talking to my mom on the phone, and she told me like, hey, it's finally done. The paperwork's done. The divorce is final. Like, it's official. And I remember, like, I knew that was always happening. My parents had been divorced essentially for almost 2.5, 3 years by this point. But to hear that it was official was just so heartbreaking to me. So those two guys were there for me, and that was one of the hardest times my freshman year. Any time that I had issues being away from home, or I felt like I was homesick or isolated in college, those guys were there for me. And that's how I feel about a lot of my friends that I still have today from school. It was when I became the person that I was, who was there with me at that time. And those relationships really mean more to me than anything else. After college, it was essentially just tons and tons of internships. I worked in baseball for one season with the Gary Railcats Independent League Baseball team, doing media relations, radio play-by-play. Worked in hockey the year after that with the Rockford Ice Hogs during the NHL lockout, which was an amazing experience. And then after that, I went back to baseball in Lansing, Michigan, and worked for the Lugnuts, the Blue Jays A-ball affiliate, for a year. When I was working in baseball in 2012, I was working as a assistant play-by-play guy, broadcast and media relations assistant, so to speak. So really long days, long hours, very busy schedule, games every single day. We had 142 games in 148 days, something like that over the summer. And I'll never forget, I called home frequently to check in, and they would call me to make sure I was okay. But towards the end of the season, it's really a grind. And I remember venting to her, and I just went on and on. I had no more energy, and I was like ready to quit. And it was just taking a toll on me. And all the while, I had no clue. Nobody had told me that she was going through essentially heart failure. So that was a really rough time. She had to have a major surgery in 2013, was put on many medicines. It was tough. That really puts things into perspective when briefly before that I was complaining about working long hours and working in baseball, which is what I've wanted to do since I was 8 years old. And here I am, like now on the verge of losing my mom. That really put things into perspective. I would not be even close to where I am now without my mom. I love her to death. I don't know what I would do without her. I don't know where I would be without her. She's just the most incredible person. She loves to cook. She's got a heart of gold. And ironically enough, it's her heart that keeps her from being the most healthy person. Thankfully, she's recovered from that, but this is something that she's going to have to deal with now for the rest of her life. She'll always have this heart condition. She's got very limited physical capabilities. She's still the same person that she's always been. Loves to cook, loves to host people at the house, wants to have pool parties, loves landscaping, being outside. She just loves the simple things. The health in my family is not the greatest in general, which certainly scares me. But my dad was always kind of like the healthiest, strongest guy. And it was May of 2015 when we found out that he was diagnosed with prostate cancer. And luckily they found it early enough where they figured, okay, we can just do a removal of the prostate, be a brief recovery time, but everything after that should be pretty straightforward. So like I was saying earlier, my parents are divorced. At the time my dad was single, and the only person that could really be there for him was me. So he had his surgery. I made sure to visit him in the hospital once, twice a day, make sure he was good. Surgery went fine, and they released him after a few days. We made it back to his apartment okay. I slept on the couch by him 4 or 5 nights in a row, checked up on him every day. I went back to work, but he seemed like everything was going fine. And then I remember one day just never hearing from him, and when I finally heard back from him one night, I was working late, and he's like, I rushed myself back to the hospital, and they did an emergency surgery on him right away, which lasted about 9 hours. He made it through the surgery, very, very heavy medication, lots of pain afterwards. He was in ICU for just under a month. It was so hard to see him like that. It took me a really, really long time to finally get out of that funk. I remember one day coming from the gym and I'm stopped at a stop sign and I just started bawling my eyes out of nowhere for no specific reason. It just kind of felt like all at one point in that moment, I was just so overwhelmed with how unhappy I was at work, being single and what had happened in my previous relationship and how that ended and how she made me feel. My health issues for both of my parents, it was so bad. It took me a really, really long time, but it also taught me a lot about myself and how I needed to cope with things. So it was around that time, after my dad had his issues and was finally kind of on the road to recovery, where I kind of re-examined my life and thought, from a big picture, I thought, I'm just gonna put myself last. I just made it a focus to worry about everybody else. I didn't think about my own situation at all, and it helped me feel better. It helped me feel more accomplished and fulfilled. You know, I never had a wedding date. I'd just go to the wedding by myself, have a good time. I'd focus on being an awesome groomsman, or I would focus on, just making sure that everybody's having fun at the wedding. Or, if I'm hanging out with friends, I'll buy the first round of drinks. I may not want to, my bank account may not say, I shouldn't, but I'll do it. I want to make sure everybody has a good time. So for, a solid couple of years, I just made it my goal to be there for everybody else. And that really, really helped put things in perspective, helped me get through it. And it almost made me feel like I was accomplishing something. And it really wasn't until, the calendar turned on 2017 where I thought, I'm comfortable with where I'm at. I feel like I've gotten over the things that have happened in my past and I'm ready to move on and kind of advance. And it wasn't until May of 2017 that I started my next relationship. I was single for well over 2 years and I was content in a way because I changed my focus. I just assumed I was going to be single the rest of my life, so I worried about everybody else. Then I met Steph, who I'm with now, and it was like, I don't even have words to describe it. It was like finding somebody who you are so on the same level with right away. It was, not to be cliche, but it was almost magical. I felt so comfortable around her right away. I felt like I could be myself. And for the first time in over 2 years, I felt intrigued to actually pursue something with somebody else. We went on this awesome trip in July. We did a week-long road trip around Lake Michigan. We visited a bunch of my friends along the way. She got to know a lot of my close friends that I've been at weddings with and whatnot. They were all immediately very approving of her, which meant a lot to me, but I wasn't concerned that they wouldn't be. But to spend an entire week, every single second together with this person, I realized, wow, I actually do really like her, and I never got sick of her. She never complained. She had never gone on a camping trip before like that, and she was great. And I remember the day we got back from our trip, the day I went back to work, I was walking back to my desk in the office and just thinking about her, and I was like, wow, I just spent a week with this girl and I miss her. And I thought to myself in my head, I was like, oh, I love this girl.
Is she the one?
She's the one, yeah. I just want people to remember me for the happy, fun, engaging, social person that I am. I want people to look back at me fondly. I want people to remember times that they spent with me and smile. I'm very proud of the work that I've done professionally at NBC Sports Chicago. I'm very proud of my resume, so to speak, but work doesn't mean anything to me. In the grand scheme of things, when I'm on my deathbed, I'm not going to think about producing the highest rated Blackhawks postgame show in history. I'm going to think about the relationships that I built, and I think what I'm most proud of is who I've become and the relationships that I have and people that I've gotten close to. My name is Slavko Bekovic, and that's my legacy.